All right. So, how can reading fiction help me in my own life and help me as a member of the Brescia family to support the Brescia community? That's the question that we're going to be answering today. We're going to dive into a lot of different topics, a lot of different specific short stories, and then at the end, we're going to go over and give an overview answer based on what we've gathered from those individual stories. So, that's pretty much going to be the layout of this video. So that being said, let's start off with Samuel by Grace Paley. We read that, and if you remember, it's about those boys, and Samuel dies on the train being reckless. Um, and the quote from that is, they are, quote, afraid of nothing. That's on page 1231. So reading that, if you kind of read it, you learn that being reckless, being, brave, it's a good character quality, but it can be taken too far. There's a difference between being brave and being reckless, and I think that's a really good thing to note when you're looking for what morals you want to have, how you want to act, who you want to be as a person. I think that would be a really good lesson to learn. Yeah, being courage is great. It's great. Or being courageous is great. It's great to be brave, but you can take it too far. There are some things that you need to have a rational fear of, and I think that really ties into how it helps me in my own life particularly. But keep in mind, it also comes down to the way you read a story. Now, when you read a story, you can get a lot of different meanings, a lot of different messages from it. So you really want to, if you find a story you really like, it might be worth a read, or worth an attempt to try to read it again from a different perspective, just to see if you can get a different sort of meaning out of it, because it might mean even more to you in that sense. Or take that the other way. Even stories that you don't really like, you don't really have a good time reading them. They don't stick out to you. Look at it from a different perspective. Maybe that would take that story and make it a lot more interesting to you. Make it the symbolic meaning that you're getting from that perspective mean a little bit more to you. That being said, we read Literary Theory and Critical Perspectives in class, and talks about those different glosses, the way you can analyze a story. And it says, quote, or there are several criticisms to use which, quote, offer some useful perspectives to consider in your critical thinking and writing about literature, end quote. That's on page 1292. So that being said, those criticisms that offer useful perspectives, I think that just dives a little bit even deeper into what I was saying. The way, the mindset that you have, if you're using, a historical gloss or something like that, what you're looking for or how you're analyzing the text is huge. It plays a giant part in what message you're going to get from the story, what you deem as important, what you take away from the story. We also read Technique in Writing the Short Story, and that kind of dives into how authors write, what techniques they should use to write in order to send those messages. So it says, authors just keep in mind that, quote, it is best of all, it is to avoid depicting the hero's state of mind. You ought to try to make it clear from the hero's actions. And that being said, it's really important for, authors, they're going to tend to write, they're not going to come out and say stuff. They're going to try to express things through actions. And I think that's just kind of a broad comparison to, not just like a hero speaking through his actions, but really every character. Of course, you don't really have to have a hero in a story, but that could go for any character. Most authors are going to try to not necessarily say things straight to you. They're going to show you, and that kind of ties into how you read a story. If you want stories to help you in your life, or help you become part of a community, then it all comes down to how you read it and how you analyze it. Personally, I found that using those different glosses that we covered in class, formalistic, who is the author, how old are they, male or female, where are they from, historical, what was going on in their time, in their life, what kind of era did they live in, that plays a huge part into the message of the story. If you get the background and you understand what's going on behind the scenes, so to say, it's a lot easier to decipher, sort of a symbolic text and get that sort of meaning out of it. So I think that's a great place to start making sure that you understand the story. So keeping that going, from a quote from How to Read Literature, it says, quote, "Literary works may best be seen not as text with a fixed sense, but as matrices capable of generating a whole range of possible meanings." And again, that just backs up exactly what I'm saying. Whatever gloss you're using, not necessarily using, but whatever perspective you're going to read that text from, whether it be historical, what's going on, in the timeline when this was written, what are the most important historical events that happened. That way you have a, kind of a mindset of the era. Or, again, about the author, formalistic, whatever mindset or perspective you try to read that story from is definitely going to affect what meaning you're getting out of the story. So I definitely recommend rereading stories through that different perspective, or, if you don't want to do that, read them once, but then think about everything through those different perspectives. Think about the story, 5-6 different times through 5-6 different perspectives, and you will be amazed at the different, meanings that you have. Now, keep going deeper, just broad right now. I promise we're going to narrow down in a little bit. But we read in the Elements of Fiction about first-person narrators. And first-person narrators are a little tricky when it comes to stuff like this, They are, quote, "making us aware as we read his or her story that the account is skewed and that we can't quite trust the point of view," end quote. Now, that being said, that's kind of just like a side note, don't really focus on what the first person narrator is saying, because at the end of the day, you can't really trust what that first person narrator say. We're all biased, we all have our own opinions, and the first person narrator, being human, it definitely has their own, whether they're fictional or not. They're going to be biased. They could be withholding information from you. So that's a great thing to keep in mind when you are reading and trying to analyze a story. Now, to kind of get into specifics, we read Prisoner on the Hell Planet in class, and that is a story, I read through it the first time. I didn't really understand what was going on. He goes crazy. His mother commits suicide, and he just can't handle it. He's expected to comfort his dad, and his dad's just a mess, understandably. But it says, quote, "I felt confused, I felt angry, I felt numb." And, that goes back into, first-person narration style. He admits that he's confused, he's angry, he's numb, that he's not really emotionally stable to be explaining the events that are happening to you, but I think that's a completely different story. But, or a completely different topic. Now, when I read through that the first time, I thought it was a great story. I thought it had an interesting message. And, I did a little bit more research. I started looking into it. And the author actually wanted to base that off the Holocaust. And, there's a quote, "Hitler did it," when they're talking about, his mom committing suicide, how terrible that is. But they're blaming it on Hitler. And if you look, even, he goes to see a psychiatrist. And if you look, that psychiatrist has a striking resemblance to Hitler. The uniform that he's in when he's in prison at the end of the story has a striking resemblance to Hitler. So, just doing research really affects what views you get out of the story. But how that helps you in your own life is really varied. How it helped me in my life is, now that gave me the tools to read things and get a variety of, meanings or stuff from a text. Whereas, if you just kind of read it through your own perspective and look at it, you're only getting one meaning. And why would you settle for one meaning when you can read it through different glosses or different perspectives? Do your research. Who's the author? Where are they from? What's going on? And you find that there's messages that you just missed all throughout a story. So I think that's a huge thing that's helped me, not just in reading, but in understanding literature. And that comes down to, how do you fit into the Brescia community? How do you help? How do you become a better part of the Brescia family? It increases your understanding. If you can analyze, written communication in any form and get different meanings out of it, and truly understand what somebody is trying to say, whether they're symbolizing something or not, you're going to be way more successful in life, in my opinion. That really helps you, come in, you clearly get the message, whatever message they're trying to whatever message that person's trying to send, and it just allows you to communicate a lot more clearly, in my opinion. Now, moving on, we read The Story of an Hour in class as well, and if you don't remember, the story begins with the main character and protagonist, Miss Mallard. She's receiving news that her husband is dead. She then goes to reflect alone, and she realizes that she is free to live her life, and she even mutters, quote, free, 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 end quote. That's on page 231. And after that, she just keeps getting happier and happier, and then her husband walks through the front door, and he wasn't actually dead. He didn't even know that there was an accident that caused other people to die. And Miss Mallard, the main character, sees that. She sees that her husband's still alive, and she immediately has a heart attack. She was so excited to be free. She convinced herself that her husband was such a bad thing in her life that she was so happy that he was gone after she got over the shock of him dying. And she sees that he's not dead, and she immediately has a heart attack. Now, that one I thought was really interesting. That's something that I never would have pictured. Your loved one, your spouse, whoever you're married to, if they died, I've never even put myself in the perspective that I would be happy about it. I've never once thought about that, and I think any sane person is kind of on the same page with that. But I personally, that really allowed me to see outside of my own perspective, which is really important if you want to be a part of this world today. You can't just see things through your perspective. You have to put yourself in other people's shoes, understand that there are situations outside of yourself. And I think that applies to how to become a better member of the Brescia family as well, and help serve the Brescia community. If you can't put yourself in other people's shoes or see things from outside of your own perspectives, which is exactly what we're doing with all of these stories, then how are you ever supposed to be kind, understand or care for others? There's a certain level of understanding that you have to have before you can ever empathize with somebody. And I think that's really important with being part of the Brescia community. That's why it's called, the Brescia community, the Brescia family. We are together, we're close, and it's not just, a campus of students that don't talk to each other. We're supposed to support each other. We're supposed to work together. In a perfect world, I should be able to go on campus, see somebody that I don't know, and just approach them and talk to them, ask them for help, find out who they are, talk to them, get to meet them, and nothing wrong with that, That's how it should be, but in reality, you're going to disagree with people. Everybody's going to disagree with people, and part of being a family, everybody has a family. You disagree with them, you fight with your family probably more than you fight with anybody else, and from my own experience. And learning the ability which literature has taught me, how to understand things outside of my own perspective, and it's a world's difference to me now, how I can just see things more clearly through other people's perspectives. I understand what they're going through. I there's 6-7 different things I can think about why that person is acting the way they are. And it really helps me to understand and not overreact in situations where I'm disagreeing with somebody. So I want to move on to an occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. If you don't remember, the story begins with the protagonist, Peyton Farquhar. I can't say his last name, I apologize. Peyton. It's being placed into a noose on Owl Creek Bridge for trying to burn it down. When he's dropped from the bridge, the rope snaps. He swims to shore while Union soldiers try to shoot him. He runs home. He sees his wife. He goes to hug her, and then, boom! He feels a pain in his neck, and he he's still on Owl Creek Bridge. He's being hung for his crimes. Quote, Peyton Farquhar was dead. His body, with a broken neck, swung gently from side to side beneath the timbers of Owl Creek Bridge. End quote. It's on page 97. Now, that story was wild. That was one of my most favorite, short stories that I have ever read in my life. It takes you for a run from beginning to end. It starts off, he's being hung for his crimes. He's on a bridge. There's all these soldiers just waiting for him to die. And out of just a stroke of luck, the rope snaps and he lands in the water. He gets a slight chance at freedom. He swims up. He comes up from the water, gasping for air, swims away. They're all shooting at him. They all miss. He runs, makes it all the way back home to his wife. And then, boom, you find out it's all in his head. And the creativity that comes out of stories like this is just ridiculous. It's stuff that I can't imagine people thinking up. But that situation in particular is really interesting to me. And that ties back into, there's other people that are going to think of things that you are not. There are people that think differently than you are, and that goes for everybody. So seeing, just even these stories separately, how these authors come up with stuff like this that I never would have understood, that I never would have came up with, blows my mind. It really proves to me that everybody really does have a different sort of thought process, that everybody's brain works a little bit differently. So personally, for me in life, literature has shown me, again, how to empathize and understand other people. And I think that ties right back into the Brescia community as well. I think if everybody just read a little bit more and understood those points, I think the world would be a little bit of a better place. Now, moving on, A Rose for Emily. That one was one of my favorite ones as well. We're going to start straight off with a quote. Quote, one of us lifted something from it. They're talking about the pillow at this point. And leaning forward, that a faint and invisible dust dry and acrid in the nostrils, we saw a long strand of iron gray hair, end quote. That's on page 320. Now, if you don't know the background of that, then that really doesn't carry any weight. But it's about Emily. She is alone, in this house. Her lover left her. They haven't, nobody's seen her lover in a very long time, so they assume that he left her. And she finally dies, so they go into her home. She dies of old age, and all these neighborhood people that have known her forever go into her home. And that was the quote. They find his body, and they find a long gray strand of hair that was obviously enemies. That was obviously Emily's. And just blows my mind. The twist ending of almost all twist endings. That was just insane. That was something that I never would have expected. So another story really similar to that, in my opinion, is Where Are You Going? Where have you been? Where the main character is forced to go with a stranger. They don't really know what's gonna happen to her. She thinks that she's doing the right thing for her family because that stranger tells her, if you don't go with me, I'm going to hurt your family. But the quote from that is, quote, this is how it is, honey. You come out and we'll drive away. Have a nice ride. But if you don't come out, we're going to wait till your people come home. And then you're all going to get it. End quote. It's on page 692. And that just kind of shows that character's mentality, what that character was going through. Now, put yourself in that situation, and just changes it completely. It's one thing to read about it, and it's one thing to empathize and imagine yourself in that situation. So honestly, what would you do if you were in that situation? It's a tough one. I personally have no idea what I would do. I can't even imagine it. But the fact that literature can make people put themselves in situations like that mentally, I think really does help people in life. Maybe, since I don't have a concrete answer for that one, it'd be a little bit difficult to explain. But if you can put yourself in a situation mentally and, think, oh, this is what I would do, then I think that really does prepare you for life. I think that really, prepares you for day-to-day situations where hopefully nowhere severe as that, but it allows you to be better prepared for decision making, things that are going to happen on a daily basis that you will never see coming. We also read The Lone Ranger and Tonto, Fist Fight in Heaven. It says, quote, witnesses. They were all witnesses and nothing more. For hundreds of years, Indians were witnesses to crimes of an epic scale. Victor's uncles were in the midst of a misdemeanor that would remain one even if somebody was to die. One Indian killing another kind of storm. This little kind of hurricane was generic. It didn't even deserve a name. End quote. Now, that one, I read The Lone Ranger and Tonto Fist Fight in Heaven, and, it was a great story. But then I learned that the author was a Native American, and he had gone through this terrible childhood. He's an alcoholic, not anymore, but he was an alcoholic and lived on a reservation for, he grew up on a reservation during his younger years. And this story is really based on him and a lot of the things that happens, pretty much nonfiction, account of his life. And for this to be in a story based off of his life, for that quote, he's describing people as witnesses. Indians were witnesses to crimes of an epic scale. Calls it a hurricane, but that hurricane doesn't even deserve a name. And that really, you read a story like that and you don't imagine it being, oh, this is based off somebody's real life. This is real. And once you know that, once you understand that all of those things actually happen, that how badly his parents treated him, how people didn't, expect him to go to college at all, how rough life on the Indian reservation was, and how he actually says how rough life was for poor communities everywhere. It wasn't just the reservation. So that really kind of makes you take a look at it again. Empathizing, putting yourself in other people's shoes. It's one thing to watch a horror movie or read something like this, and it's another thing to understand that it's real, that this actually happened in the real world. And I think once you do that, it hits a whole nother level of painful when you read it and when you understand that real live people actually went through that stuff. So again, I think the biggest thing to take away from that is empathizing with other people, understanding that not everybody's life is like yours, or for me at least. Not everybody's life is like mine. I might have it easier than some people, I might have it harder than some people, but the way we think about things, the way we interpret things, and the way we view things are all different person to person. So recognizing that and remembering that in day-to-day life is crucial if you ever really want to understand somebody else or you ever want to get along with another group of people. And that's even more so true on a classroom setting, on a campus setting like Brescia University, where we all have the same values. We're all expected to follow the same rules, understand each other, get along, work together, and educate each other. We are part of an educated community that just strives for better learning, better education, and better people. To do that, to build a community like that, you have to have people that are willing to work together. And you can't have people that are willing to work together on that sort of scale, have the same values and everything like that. You cannot have people willing to work together like that if they can't empathize with each other, put themselves in each other's shoes. A great example of somebody else's life that you probably haven't experienced, is Sweat, Zora Neale Hurston. She has a quote: "I done told you time and time again to keep them white folks' clothes out of this house. I've been taking and washing for 15 years. Work, sweat, cry, sweat, pray, sweat." End quote. So that just kind of shows you that other people's lives may not be anything like yours. She's been washing for 15 years. She works, she sweats. She cries, she sweats. She prays, she sweats. Every part of her life revolves around the work that she has to do to survive. And that just goes back to my main point. You have to empathize with other people. You have to understand that other people's lives are nothing like yours. That their experiences, whatever they're bringing to the table, is just completely different than probably anything that you could ever imagine. Now, Sonny's Blues was really interesting to me as well. He says, quote, "I couldn't believe it, but what I mean by that is I couldn't find any room for it anywhere inside of me. I had kept it outside of me for a long time. I hadn't wanted to know." End quote. And personally, to me, I think that that's the way a lot of people feel when they finally get hit with the realization that other people's lives are nothing like them. You think about yourself and you think, I am the center of the universe. In some sense, your life revolves around you, when really, when you look at the bigger picture, it doesn't at all. Life is all about people coming together and working together. And I think if people would just go through these short stories and read that and really understand that, it would help a lot. If everybody had that mentality that one of many, that my life is not revolving around me at all, what can I do for others? I think things would be a lot easier for everybody. Going into that even more, The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. I've probably said this 4 or 5 times, how much I love these stories, but The Things They Carried is by far my favorite short story I've ever read in my life. O'Brien's a Vietnam vet. He knows what he's talking about. He has been there. He's writing this from his own perspective in Vietnam. And if you haven't read that story, I definitely recommend it. But he says, quote, "He understood. It was very sad, he thought. The things men carried inside. The things men did or felt they had to do." End quote. It's on page 708. And that's after a little background information. He goes into that war. He is in love. He keeps thinking about his girlfriend. He can't wait to get back to her. And then right there in that point of the story, whole mindset change from him, from that character, and throws away that picture of his girlfriend. He decides he's just done with her. He's gonna forget about her because she is not there. She's not gonna save him from Vietnam, and that's when he understood the things that war can make you do, the things that men carried inside, the things that they did or felt that they had to do. It's not because they want to. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. It's because those people in that time felt like they had to do it or that they would die, or that somebody they knew would die in war. And the weight of that is kind of what he's talking about, in my opinion, which is a huge weight that I couldn't possibly attempt to understand, but he does. And recognizing that there are other people that understand things that you don't sounds easy in theory, but once you get into practice, it's a lot harder, recognizing that not only that there are smarter people than you, there are people that understand things that you don't. If you really want to help yourself in your own life, understand that everybody's mind is completely different. Their perspectives, where they've come from, everything that has built them into who they are today is completely different than what has built you into who you are today. And that has really been what's helped me personally so far in this English class. But going back to help me as a member of the Brescia family, there's only so much that you can improve on in your own life without applying it to others. And being part of the Brescia family is huge to me. That's where I'm at the majority of the time, in class, doing homework, working on projects. So if you can't understand that, I think after you do understand that, respect for everybody is just comes naturally. You can't help it. So that is what I truly believe. That is how reading fiction has helped me in my own life, and that is how it has helped me as a member of the Brescia family and to support the Brescia community. Thank you so much.